Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live show with me here, Peter Driver in Piscari Fly. Hope everyone's keeping well. How you doing, Dave Donovan, Bernard, Declan Noonan, Liam Long, Colin O'Gara, Patrick Burke, Declan Smith's on with us there. Excuse me. Great to see so many is back on. Hope he's all had a good week. Hope everybody that managed to get out during the week on the rivers. I see the two Ronnies were out today. Hope I see he's got a couple of throw anyway, lads. So well done. How you doing, Kane? Darius is on there. Kieran Flynn's on. Brian Kennedy's on there. Good evening to you all. We're in a different venue tonight. We're downstairs. No fly tying tonight. Didn't have to drag all the gear upstairs, but I had to drag all the software downstairs for tonight's show. A little bit of a change tonight, folks. It's leader night. So tonight's all about leaders. It's probably the most common question or topic I get asked about on a yearly basis is leaders, setups, formulas, all that kind of stuff. And all week or for the last week or two, it's been non-stop. How you doing, Christopher Crotty? Aidan Gill is on there. How you doing, Aidan? Mike is on there from Sussex. Good to have you with us there, Mike. Chris Oliver, how you doing? Get asked this about this topic a whole lot. So I said, you know what? How you doing, Neil? I'm going to do a show on it. We're going to do a show. Might be as long as other shows, but we're going to do a show on leaders. If you have any questions along the way, please send them across. I won't be tying tonight, so I'll actually be able to see more of your questions and hopefully get to them throughout the process of the show. So we're going to tackle 4 different styles of leaders tonight. We're going to do a nymphing leader. How you doing, James Hope? We're going to do look at Spanish style leader systems for nymphing. We're going to look at progressive dry fly leaders, and we're going to look at the dry dropper setups, which is one I get asked probably about most of all. How you doing, Thomas? Tom Ankertel? It is a great night for the show, Tom. It's a wild, been a wild couple of days. Hope everyone got okay through the storm and stuff like that. But so Dave is going to be along at some stage with a trivia. Watch out for that one. He'll be along at some stage. We're going to tie a couple of leaders later on as well. And we're going to do a lot of discussion. It's going to be kind of just sitting here. How you doing, Dave Hannaford? Good to have you on with us. Nigel Haynes is on there from South Wales. You're going to be listening to me babbling on here a lot. And if you didn't think I was cracked before tonight, you're certainly going to think I'm cracked after tonight. When I go into the whole detail about leaders and stuff like that, it's been a pet thing for me for a long time. Leaders, I've done a lot of research and studying it over the years. I suppose one of my earliest experiences in realizing the importance of leaders and understanding leaders and stuff like that is that how you doing, Elaine Munn and Deirdre Delaney, two ladies I'm going to start tonight. How you doing, girls? Hope you're keeping well. George is on there as well. I remember sitting on a bus coming back from a championship somewhere in the early years of competition fishing, and there was a guy on the bus I was sitting beside, and he was about to go up and collect a team medal. It was after the final session. His team had won the gold, sure, Polish or whatever. Peter O'Connell, how you doing? Neil Hamilton, Martin O'Rourke, and Chris Oliver. Good question, Chris. We'll come to that in a little while. But we were talking, and his team was about to go up and collect the gold medal. They'd done well, they won all their sessions, and I was sitting on the bus, and we were kind of talking, and I did really bad, of course. But like, I was asking him about, like, it was really dry fly on the final session that won it. For him, I think might have won that final session to get his team over the line. But I asked him, about the fly, and he said something that has always stuck with me. He said the fly had nothing to do with it. He said it was the leader being able to present that fly properly is what won him that session, what caught him all those fish. He firmly believed that the fly, if the leader's not right, if you don't have a good understanding of the leader's not right, well, what's the point in having good flies if you can't present them right? His understanding was on that particular day that the leader was more important than the fly because it presented the fly perfectly to the fish in order for the fish to take it. So thanks a million, Brendan. Brendan's Milan's on there, Simon. How you doing? Brendan says new site. Yeah, we have a new site up at the moment, folks. I have a note here to mention it. Should have mentioned it in the intro. New site up. Took a lot of work. Still a lot of work to go. So anyone that comes across any glitches, be really glad if you send us across a message or something to say we found a problem or something's not right. By all means, do. You won't offend us in any whatsoever. Love the feedback, and thanks a million for everyone for their continued support as well. How you doing, John Ditch from New York? But yeah, new website's up and running, been a lot of work and still a lot of work to go, but really appreciate everyone's feedback. So if anybody gets a chance to have a gawk out there for us and drop us a little message, it'd be great. But back to tonight. So I have a load of notes written out for myself as well, so I don't miss too much for you. So you've all heard me go on about systems and processes. Okay, I've mentioned this before. And this is a real important, this kind of topic really gets home that whole theory that, the process of casting a fly, or getting the process is casting the fly, or getting that fly to a uh, desired location on a rising fish, in close to a ditch, behind a stone, or wherever it may be. And the delivery of that fly and the presentation of that fly is crucial. Now, if we don't have the correct systems in place in order to complete that process, i.e., the tapered leader or a leader system in general, well, then we're not going to be effective fishing. Okay, so we're not going to have an effective process of being able to make the cast and deliver that fly. Now, sometimes, yes, your casting skills can help, but an awful lot of the time, understanding leader setups and having a good concept of what your leader is to do for you is as important as having good casting skills. Okay, so there's a lot to it. Like, you can get, when it comes to the system we look at to achieve this process, like, how often can you honestly ask yourself, um, how often can you honestly ask yourself, have I really looked at my leader systems and all that? Now, yes, there's an awful lot of generic leaders out there, and they're very good. We've got tons of them here in the shop, tons of them. We got Maxima, Solderini, Rio, Straft, Erica from Norway, Saboya tapered leaders, Vivaris leaders, our own leaders, more Solderini, different coloured nymphing leaders. It's just endless what tapered leaders are out there on the market. And they're good, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everyone should go out now tomorrow and dump all their generic leaders. I call them generic leaders, by the way. Dump all their generic leaders and go to start making their own leaders. But I think having a good understanding of what your leader is, and I say, the part it plays in the system to complete the process of dry dropper fishing and presentation, Dylan Roberts, absolutely, is crucial, absolutely crucial. Now, does it mean that you're going to go out on a day and blank because your leader is not exactly what it should be? Not necessarily. You might get 5 fish, but you mightn't get 7. You might get 4, but you could have got 6 or 7. By having by building the leader or having a better understanding of what your leader's to do. So, and of course the system can change according to conditions, be it wind or be it rain or dry day, the trout's behavior, the clarity of the water, everything like that's going to determine what leader system I'm going to put up on that particular day, be it dry fly or nymphing. And again, all depends on what type of fishing I'm doing. It will determine what leader system I'm going to use. So some could argue that the leaders are more important than the actual fly itself. So, you know, when we kind of ask ourselves, that what the system we have for using the system. So why do we make our own? And the system that we have for making that cast and using the leader, it is a formula. So it's a formula that's made up and it's broken down. Now, over the years, I have gathered formulas, and I just quickly flick through them here. I'm going to show you some formulas later on of some of the flies I use. Or some of the leaders I use. I'm going to put them up on the screen. It'll be there. You can go back on YouTube tomorrow. By the way, hi to all our YouTubers. How you doing, Adam from Bottom Glass in County Wicklow? You can go back onto YouTube and see all those formulas. These are the formulas I use. Don't mind sharing them. But when it comes to formulas, just to give you some idea of what sort of formulas I have, it is just, these are all pages full of formulas, and you can see all measurements, diameters. It is pages after pages after pages after pages after pages of notes, handwritten, typed out, different competitors' formulas that have been given to me over the years. Notes of studies, some of my own leaders that I've worked on, notes scribbled on the back of them. It's just endless, the formulas that I've worked on over the years, for myself and other people to get the correct taper. Depends on what they want it for. So why do we put the different tapers into the leaders is to complete different processes. So an easy way to break it down is we have aggressive versus progressive. Okay, so an aggressive tapered leader, which we're going to be building a nymphing aggressive tapered leader there now. Absolutely, Simon. An aggressive tapered leader, basically, a simple way of explaining it, the turnover in an aggressive tapered leader is like that. Okay, it's aggressive, it's fast, it accelerates into the turnover. Okay, so your rod, when you're casting your rod, it's creating energy that travels down through the fly line. It travels on through the fly line. If you had a flat level leader after the fly line, just a piece of straight mono, that energy just completely disintegrates once it hits that flat level. But if you taper it down, that energy can either accelerate or it can decelerate. Okay, so an aggressive tapered leader will accelerate that energy right to the point of turnover, i.e., accelerate the entry. If you're nymphing, it accelerates the entry of the nymph into the water. If you're dry fly fishing, it accelerates the dry fly landing on the water. Okay, so you could potentially make a splash. And on some occasions, you want that. Okay, we'll explain that a bit when we go to dry dropper and stuff like that. I'm just reading a message here from Neil. I'll get to that in a second there, Neil. So progressive is the opposite. Okay, progressive, that's the way your fly turns over. Okay, so there is days when we'll use progressive, more so dry fly, things like that. And then of course having a good understanding of tapers and different things like that for nymphing contact throughout. The kind of different, understanding the different tapers and having tapers that suit the way you fish will help your delivery of the fly, presentation to be mentioned there, accuracy, contact, which is huge. Like for dry dropper and nymphing, if you don't have contact after you make the cast throughout the entire swing, you're losing fishing time, you're losing fish, you're not in contact with those flies, and you're not going to be effective. So we're going to talk a bit about that when we get into building the leaders, of how using that taper or building the taper into your leader in order to get that contact immediately. As soon as that fly makes entry, you should be automatically in contact. If there's slack there, a fish can pick it up, spit it out, and you won't even know anything about it. So, having that kind of an understanding is crucial going forward. I hope you're not losing me here. Shesh, yeah, if you give them what they want, they take it off a rope. You can argue that, absolutely. Some of them will. Some of them will, but if you don't give it to them properly, more fussier fish, well then, if you don't present the dries to them, you could potentially not, if you're out on a tough day when there is a few fish looking up and you're presenting a dry fly to them, if it's not presented right, be it on a rope or be it on a spider web, they're not gonna take it. So you can absolutely ask that. Um, yeah, Aidan, and there's lots of good tapered leaders out there as well. Um, Different types of shock leaders for sea fishing, and as you mentioned there, Daiwa tournament tapered leaders, carp leaders, they can be very good. Now, so firstly, we're going to have a look at building a nymph leader. Okay, so this nymph leader is an aggressive 420 leader. Okay, so it's really aggressive, and I use this quite a lot. Now, it is a bit of a heavy leader. Okay, we're not down to the Spanish style 0.18 stuff. We're staying up in the heavy end of it. And I use this leader, it's probably my go-to leader majority of the time. I use a lot in windy conditions. I use a lot for when I want accuracy. It can be, really good, for accelerating the entry of the nymph in the water. So I'm fishing smaller beads and I want to put them really onto a penny, but I want the entry of that nymph to accelerate on impact and really get down very fast, very quick. Well, then I use a super aggressive tapered leader, in order to achieve that and help me get down there. And if you get that impact, sometimes that impact can be, how you doing, Tony Rooney? Sometimes that impact can be can be an aggressor. It can be something that will catches the fish's attention, and then good man, Kevin. Will catches the fish's attention, and will a fish can instinctively kind of attack that fly as well. And that's when you're doing later on, we'll talk a bit about the dry fly aggressive leaders, fishing streamy water, and how that can actually help you bring up some fish to the blind as well. So I made a little video there that I'm going to show you first, just to give you an idea on some knots and stuff like that, of building this aggressive 420 leader. So watch this one, and I'm finding here now. I have a lot of clicking through tonight, folks, so bear with me. Watch this little bit of a video, and then we can come back here and have a chat about the build of it. This is the nymphing leader, 4 aggressive 20, probably my most common and one of my most popular leaders. Find it very effective. So have a look at this one, folks, and I'll be back with you in a few minutes. Okay, it doesn't seem to be any sound on that there. So I don't know what the hell happened to that, why that didn't get with sound. But can everyone still see or hear me here now? So basically what we're doing there is sorry about this now, folks. But basically, thanks, Peter. Um what I'll actually do is I'll come back to the Okay, we're back here. Sorry about that, folks. That didn't work out. So I'm going to talk you through the leader here. Okay, I got it here. I'm just going to unwind it here now and pretty much talk you through exactly what it was. It'll be easier this way. Okay, rather than watch that. I don't know why that sound is not coming on actually. Um, did the sound actually come on that now, or are we? Anyway, we're back here now. So what I'm going to talk you through is this leader. Okay, so when I'm making the leaders, I'm using Maxima. Okay, Maxima Ultra Green is what I use for making all my leaders. Okay, um, you can also use Soldering Camofill and stuff like that. It's pretty good stuff too. But I use Maxima. I'm just going to root out this formula for this one here now because I can talk you through it then as we go through it. Okay, so I start off with Maxima, and what I do is I use 1 meters, 1 meter 700 of the 0.42. Now I'm going to put this formula up in a second as well, so don't worry about it. So it's 1 meter 700 of 0.42. Okay, for this section, the butt section, which is quite a heavy, long butt section. So basically, if you want an aggressive leader, the butt section must be the longer sections, working its way down smaller and smaller. For progressive, it's exactly the opposite, and you'll see that when I put up a formula later on for a dry fly leader. So this is 0.42, 1.7 meters. I then go down to using a double blood knot. I'll go down to 0.40 and it's zero point 0.7 of a meter here, so it's 70 cm. Then I go down to 0.35 and it's 60 cm of 0.35 down to another blood knot. Now I come into a section here, and this is called a locator section. Okay, this locator section can be made out of my most two common materials. One is strain. Okay, so it's gold strain, quite visible. And I'll explain why we call it the locator. Or sometimes I use what's called concept pink. Okay, none of that left on that spool, another spool there. Sometimes concept pink can be quite good. That's a sea fishing line. I just like the colour, really. My eyes pick it up quite well. And basically, I've got a 40 centimeter section there of strain, gold strain. Now, the locator is there for a couple of reasons, okay? One is that often when we're fishing silvery water on rivers or stuff like that, visibility or getting your eye to get to the indicator can be a little bit difficult when it's on that water, in that silvery kind of water. So what the locator has done, it's going to be up off the river a little bit, possibly mid-air, a couple of foot, maybe even in the air, 2 foot, 3 foot in the air. And there could be a tree line, there could be a bank or something behind you, and that locator will catch your eye and help you find or locate the indicator. Okay, so that's the idea of that locator section. It's just to help with visibility. It also gives me a little bit of a dual purpose that if I decide I want to let the indicator down into the water because I'm fishing a deeper pool or whatever it may be, well then what will happen is I use that locator as my indicator. Okay, so I have a little locator section there. That's 0.30, or that's 0.3, or that's 0.30 in diameter, and it's 40 cm long. I come down in then to 0.25 in diameter, and I've got 80 cm of 0.25 in diameter. Okay, that's the end of my tapered leader. Now, once I have that built, I coil it all up. I use the narrow end first, and I coil it up into my hand like so. Wrap it up very securely, and then you bring it into your kitchen, and you go into a saucepan of boiling water, and I put it into the boiling water for maybe, depends on how much stretch I want in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch it out now to help with tippet protection. So what I'll do is I'll boil that for maybe 3.5, 4 minutes, depending on how much I want. Sometimes 4.5 minutes, sometimes 2.5 minutes. But it'll make that leader very supple. It'll also give you an awful lot of stretch. Okay, so when we're looking at that impact of hitting those fish, a bigger fish on light tippets, well, that little bit of spring in your leader can give you a little bit of tippet protection. But I said it makes it very, very supple as well. Okay, now before you boil it, okay, when you're trimming off your tag ends off your knots, don't trim them off completely. Leave a couple of mil on them because it'll shrink a little bit and it might loosen up a little bit, those knots. And once you boil it, take it all back out, unravel it, and give it a real good stretch. I mean, stretch the hell out of it. Test every knot. Some of them might slip a little bit, some might lock in a little bit more. If you trim it too tidy, boil it, there's a good chance one or two of those are going to come loose. But at least with the tag ends, they won't come loose. They'll tighten up, and then you clean them off afterwards. You do not boil your indicator. section. Okay, going down to the indicator section then from there, down after I put in my 0.25, whatever indicator you're decided best suited for you for that day, you choose. This one here now, if I can just unravel it a bit. I've got some Hannick tricolor. Okay, so lots of different types of indicators out there as well, folks. Use whatever's visible. That's the most important thing. You've got Hens competition ones. They're good. Like the colour of them. The only thing is they come in 40 cm lengths. You can't get them any longer. You got packets of Solderini. You got Solderini spools. You got Hannick tricolor. You got Hannick bicolor, yellow and black. You got Hannick bicolor, pink and yellow, and some other stuff there as well. But this one here, I just have the Hannick tricolor, so it's yellow, hot orange, kind of yellowish, to a black, to a pink. Okay, it's good. It can be good on certain days, and you can see I've left the little tag end on. Okay, when you tie it onto your leader, so here's my leader. No, here's my leader, and here's my indicator, and I leave that tag end on. That's just to help again with visibility and stuff like that. Absolutely, Graham. Maxim is some stuff through the decades. All right, it takes a boil really well. So we leave that little tag end on, and that just really helps with visibility again. When I come down to the other end of my leader, I don't put in any tipper rings. I'm not a great lover of tipper rings, but what I do use is a perfection loop. Okay, probably one of the best knots out there. A little perfection loop is what I use on the very tag end. You can't really see it there now on the camera, but a little perfection loop is super handy. You can tie them as fine. If I really sit down and really concentrate on them, I can tie them as fine as the diameter of a needle. You wouldn't even think there's a loop there at all. But perfection loop, little, it's just, I don't personally feel that mono meet metal is a weak point in my eyes. So I think perfection loop just might have that little bit of give that could just save that one decent fish. So that's what I tend to fish there. And that's the nymph and aggressive leader. I'm going to put up the formula for you there now. It'll be up for a couple of seconds, and then I will be, this will be up on YouTube. There's your diameters. There's the whole lot, your indicator section. You can see the 0.30 is 40 cm long. That is your locator section. Okay, I should have wrote that in, but that is your locator section. Really, really good leader. I've been using this for years. Fantastic. And leaders are something that you shouldn't just dismiss either very quickly. I use them for an entire season. Sometimes they can get 2 or 3 seasons out of a leader. I think the more you use them, the more you get to know them, and the better they can become over time. So keep your leaders. They'll work quite well, and you'll that's your nymph aggressive. Okay, so that's nymph aggressive. That's it. That's going to really accelerate in strong winds and stuff like that. That's really going to accelerate the entry turnover at nymph, give you contact, and that's what we want. We want those nymphs to pop out. When we make that cast forward or any stage through the entire cast, we want those nymphs to really pop out there, have complete contact on entry. So if a fish hits that, if you're fishing skinny, streamy water and a fish hits that nymph on impact, you need to know about it. If you don't have contact or if you have slack there, you won't know about that. So you've got to really, you've got to really have that contact throughout the entire cast. And it certainly will add up to a couple of fish at the end of your session. How's everybody going? Have I lost anybody yet, or he's all hanging in there? So that's an aggressive nymph leader. What's more commonly being used now is what an awful lot of people call a Spanish style nymph leader. Okay, and it's getting really popular. Has been over the last number of years. It's normally Jamie, they can be very good, and the drops and stuff like that. You fish them in a different way. Good question. They can be very effective for kind of. I know Dave is. I'm not as good on them as Dave would be. He does a lot of the coil fishing, but they can be very good. And there is times of the year and different situations where fishing coils can be very, very effective. Almost Dave would fish them almost like a dry dropper at some stage. Yes, Kevin, it does as well. Yeah. The boiling does help the leader stop the memory loops. Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. It makes it very supple, really supple. Like I wouldn't be able to show it you. I tried earlier on, but if I actually made up a 30-foot aggressive tapered leader, I can catch the butt of it in my hand and literally flick. It'll turn over 30 foot perfectly in my hand. It's not just because taper, but boiling makes them so supple. Lovely, especially for dry fly leaders. It's really good. So Yeah. So the Spanish style nymphing leaders, a lot of guys are going down to 0.18 and stuff like that straight through. And they're like, don't get me wrong, again, on their day, they're good. They can add up. They're very sensitive. I can find them a bit difficult with wind, and unfortunately we live in Ireland and we have a lot of wind. So there can be an awful lot of spending an awful lot of your time unwrapping around the top of the rod and stuff like that because they blow all over the place. If it's a bit of a windy day. But nice calm conditions and you're fishing in skinny water, looking for tough fish. They certainly can be very very effective. Now, what a lot of guys are using is Trabuco, Special C, XPS. High vis, okay. Trabuco is what an awful lot of people make their leaders out of for Spanish nymph and Spanish style nymph and over the side of the world. I do too, and it's good stuff. We sell it here in the shop. All this stuff we have all the stuff here in the shop. But it can be very very good. And I use it quite a bit as well. But say just watch out for the wind. I'm going to put up a little bit of a formula there in relation to that kind of Spanish style nymphing leader, and give you an idea there of it's quite a simple taper to it. You can see there I have 0.25. Now I look at sometimes I'll go to I'll start with the 0.18, and then work, and just go straight through. But say, if I was what I'm most comfortable at, and that's what I'm always looking at, what am I most efficient at as well, is that, that I'm spending less time in tangles or less times in trouble. Well then I'll go to the heavier stuff. So I use 0.25, 3 meters plus at least, and then I'm down to 0.22, just a slight little taper on the end, just to help with that turnover and contact. And then I've got my indicator section of 0.22 as well, be it whatever you want. The things we like about using Trabuco is, it has a little bit of stretch in it. It is very visible, which is great, say in Irish rivers, especially because we got so much sun and cloud and mixed water all the time coming straight through, that it allows us to see and track our nymphs and stuff very quickly and very easily. You know, it can be very supple, and it's also very very sensitive because it's so light. Now Trabuco tends to stay very straight. Okay, so even though it's very light, and if you're not in blustery conditions, it can be very very straight. So your contact to those nymphs when they're swimming. Um, Thanks, Betty. How you doing? Uh, no, we haven't been blown away down here at all. Not yet, Betty. We didn't get too bad down here actually. A little bit of power loss yesterday, but other than that, really good question, Declan. And if we were actually watching your other video, I would have talked about that. Declan Nunes just asked there, can knots get caught in the rod rings? Yes, they can. And some people don't like building their own tapered leaders for that very reason. Declan, I've got so used to it over the years, it doesn't even bother me anymore. Doesn't even bother me at all. So doesn't bother me at all, Declan. But yeah, they can be a bit annoying until you get used to them. Some people even put a little bit of flexi resin on either side of the knot, or a little bit of trade there to build it up to make it kind of tapered, so it doesn't get caught in the eyes. But it doesn't bother me one bit. I've got so used to it over the years. So no, it's grand. No, obviously with the likes of the Spanish style nymphing leader, it's their form you see there. It's not going to get caught. All the knots are outside of it, bar what's going back on to join into your fly line. So that's kind of a Spanish style nymphing leader there. So they're kind of two of the most common nymphing leaders that I would use throughout the season. I do like the aggressive one, and I hope you get the whole idea of being an aggressive, accelerate that entry into the water, stuff like that. Now, of course, you know, the joy of making your own leaders means you get to play with the formulas. You get to write them down, play with the formulas. Um, yeah, really good question as well, Dylan. How do you connect your leaders to the fly line if you're using one? It depends. It depends, so it depends on what line I'm using, how often am I going to change it. Like some of my nymphing leaders, it would be permanent because I'm going to get most of the season out of a nymph leader. So sometimes it's permanent. An awful lot of time what I'll do now is I'll strip back the core and I'll use an exposed loop. There's loads of videos out there to show how that's done. Very clean attachment. Sometimes you can splice them in. Some of the dry fly stuff I'd have it spliced in, and it's a it goes straight through like. But an awful lot of time now would be just exposing a bit of the core, just making a very small, neat little loop there. Do it yourself, and a bit of resin and a little bit of trade, and it's a good job. There's plenty of good videos out there on it. I think Howard Crossan did a good video on it there last year, the year before I watched it. But that's normally the way. Thanks, Peter. Peter Wadden's on there with us as well. But so I hope you all get the idea of systems and process and what we look for, as regards paying attention to our leaders, and as regards our tapers as well. But since as a point I was trying to get there before I answered Dylan was that making your own leaders allows you to adjust them an awful lot more too. Okay, so you can take a little bit out of here, take a little bit out of there to just the way you fish, to just the way your swing balance is, i.e., so that you've got contact throughout the entire cast, not just balancing a rod on your finger. That swing balance is a far more important concept. That when the whole thing is built together and it's built for you, the way you cast and stuff like that, well, then the contact has to be there throughout the entire process. Otherwise, if one of your systems are letting you down, the leader, well, then that process is not complete, and you're not going to be as effective. You're going to get tired. Your arms are going to get tired because you're forcing things. When you get the right leader system set up on your rod that suits you, it's effortless. Like, it's absolutely effortless, especially when we're talking about, say, fishing in Irish, Welsh, English conditions, wherever it may be. Wind is a killer. Like, especially when you're going to the dry flies. We're going to move on to the dry flies there now. Having wind in your face when you're fishing is just every angler's nightmare. Nymphing, you'd hear so many guys, oh God, I hate that fucking wind. It was driving me nuts, blowing the leader all over the place. Well, build your leader to a certain way that it's not going to be as a nuisance as it can be if you're using, let's say, the 0.18. Go a little bit heavier, aggressive, make that taper a bit more aggressive so your nymphs and your dries will punch through. Like, if I'm fishing into a strong wind, I'm not going to change up to a 5-weight or a 6-weight or 7-weight rod. I'm going to stay on the 3-weights and 2-weights. I'm just going to change my leader system into a super aggressive, and that thing will just pop out there every time for me. Most times, anyway. Look, you're always going to get your timing wrong. That's a fault of my own, not of the system, or the system I'm using. But using a super aggressive taper will help you get that fly to turn over, and the energy transfer from the rod down the line into that turnover right to the tip of that fly is accelerated, and it'll pop out every time for you, or an awful lot of time for you anyway. So, moving on to dry fly fishing, then different types of tapers here. Now, we also use an awful lot of progressive tapers in dry fly fishing. And I spend some of those formulas are actually from some French guys that I spent a bit of time with. And, they're really big into their formulas and stuff like that, especially for dry fly fishing, very long leaders, progressive versus aggressive and all that. So progressive leader is built basically in the opposite way an aggressive leader is built. The heavier sections are much shorter. As you get down along to the finer sections, they grow in length, and that basically turns the taper the opposite way. So it's much more progressive. So the energy transfer into that will be quite accelerated at the very start, but then as it makes its way down through the taper into those longer flat sections, it anyway, it fades out. Okay, it fades out, and it's a much gentler. So if you're fishing dry fly on flat water, crystal clear, really difficult fish, you don't want to spook them, well, then you'll switch to a progressive leader. A little bit more difficult to fish in wind, but your turnover and the landing of your flies will be will be much softer. Okay, and you'd have a less chance of spooking fish. So we'd say landing like a thistle. So that's where we use a progressive. Where I use an aggressive, back to the same, even that formula I put up there for that nymph aggressive leader, I would use that same formula on a dry fly, but I wouldn't have the locator in there, obviously, and I wouldn't have the indicator. But if I'm fishing up along a piece of water that's very fast, very streamy, very pockety, and there's an awful lot of opportunistic fish there that, they only have a split second to make up their mind, or they're going to take it or they're not, I would often go in there and yeah, I see that, Jerry. I look at they're good, Jerry. Dave is saying questions coming up there soon. Shop bought leaders, they can be good. I'm absolutely not dismantling at all. Tonight's not just about saying, everyone should go out there and start making their leaders. Tonight's about giving information to have a better understanding of your leaders, and the purpose of your leaders, and what do we do. Yes, sometimes I will, Terry. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I'll put some muslin on them. Sometimes I'll clean them down. I use a bit of mud on them. It all depends. An awful lot of time, all my dry fly leaders, muslin the crap up of them. I get them right up there. Keep them on the surface, and especially when we go to dry dropper, we'll talk about that, the importance of getting everything on the surface to create the contact once it lands on the water. I use an awful lot of muslin, Terry, on them. Do you do the same? But so tonight's about just getting across the message of of what our leaders are supposed to do as regards giving you guys a better understanding of the aggressive things that the system and the process. Okay, So there's absolutely nothing wrong with those. If they suit you and they're in the right conditions and they work for you, fine. But if there's a day coming or a day happens to you along the way, you just feel the system wasn't right, that you were using, well then maybe it's worth trying, a formula, testing it out, tweaking it a bit and see how much of a difference, especially when it comes to dry fly, how much of a difference will that make. So there is times when I use the aggressive formulas for dry fly when I'm fishing up that streamy water, my home river in the Avonmore. You get an awful lot of good trout. An awful lot of good trout sitting in the pockets, the margins, very aggressive fish, very opportunistic. They're not going to get massive hatches like you do on some of the bigger midland rivers and stuff like this and mountain stream. And if you go up that river with a small dry or a clink or something like that on a super aggressive leader and just bang it into those little pockets and only leave it on the water for a second and make a big impact on that fly landing in that pocket, you will get fish because they'll come up as a reaction, an aggressive reaction to that fly. Not because they see it as an imitation of food, but they come up out of aggressive reaction, and you can get an awful lot of fish on that day on that dry fly doing that method. You can't do that with a progressive leader. You probably won't be able to do it with any of those either. Okay, you won't get the same impact. It's got to be a short, maybe 8 foot leader, 7.5 foot leader, real high impact, real super aggressive, very long head butt section. It might even be 0.50 on the butt section for that leader, tapering down very quickly over the last 2-3 foot, just to get that. When that fly hits it, it's hitting it like you've just thrown a stone into that particular into that spot of water. Very, very accurate. I also use that kind of a leader from fishing beetles and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they can be okay, Jerry. Yeah, 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 yeah. JJ, it depends on what the leader's made out of. You can definitely. So Dave is up there with his question. The famous TC Kingsmill Moore had a well-known gilly when fishing the Corrib. Can you name him? Can you name the gilly? And see, when we're talking about leaders tonight, we're giving away 4 sticks of Mirko Scaffar's wax. 4 of his wax to keep someone going for the season. 4 of the colours is for tonight's prize. Dave will keep an eye on it there and let me know who won it. Yeah, they could be good too, Aiden. So anyway, when I'm fishing beetles and I want that beetle to make an impact um on slow, still waters in by banks or whatever, having that aggressive turnover, that aggressive taper in the leader will help you because you need that beetle to make an impact. It's the very same as it's dropped out of a tree. Again, I watched a Frenchman a couple of years ago here in the River Nor, and we struggled on a really hot summer's day. We really struggled himself, and there was 2 Frenchmen actually really struggled. And one guy drifted away from us and went up along a very difficult flat. Like there's no way would I have considered going up into this piece of water. Some good fish there, but very difficult on a day that was there. River was very low, absolute scorching hot, and we got a phone call after 2 minutes. Get up here quick, guys. We've got it. Went up, and only for a scene you nearly wouldn't believe it. But this guy was fishing an inch long foam beetle, and he had a super aggressive tapered leader on it, and he was driving that beetle into the water so it would make a very high impact. The beetle would go submerged for a microsecond. As soon as that beetle popped back to the surface, bang, fish on straight away. Fish would come up from the deep, hit it, and these were really high quality fish. Now, there's no way, and he was saying, like when we're talking about it afterwards, the setup and stuff like that, he was saying leader is so important because there's no way he would have got that aggressive turnover or that acceleration over turnover without having his own homemade leader. If he'd had a generic leader, he wouldn't have been able to perform that same task. So there is times when having your tapers and your formulas and your own leaders, are super effective. So Not too bad. Graham is on with us there as well. So looking then at say progressive leaders, when we're looking to kind of be out in that more trickier water, and looking at doing a progressive leader. There's a formula for a progressive leader that I've used for many, many years. Probably one of the first leaders I ever made myself. Very, very effective. Super leader. Really, really good formula. Quite a bit of work in that leader, as you can see. But that's a progressive. Okay, so that's going to land. You can see as we get down along to the 0.20, the 0.15, it is much more longer in the sections, exactly the opposite to a progressive leader, and can be really, really effective for, say, those really tough conditions when you're on calm, still water, and you got fussier fish, and you want that fly to just land like a thistle on the water, as I say. It can be super effective. Again, all joined together with blood knots. Brian Kennedy is first in there. Congratulations, Brian. Brian, I'll get those 4 sticks out to you. Well done. That's wax is super important for your nymphing. If you're, if your nymphing leaders or your nymphing indicators are hard to see, a bit of that wax on it will make it stand out like a mile. We got all that here in store as well, if any is needed for the start of the season. But say if you're out in those really flat camp conditions for really difficult fish, that formula there is a brilliant one. It's a really good formula. That's more progressive, so that's going to be quite that's going to be quite slow turnover and very difficult to cast that into wind. If you got a slight breeze behind you, it can be super effective. Now we're going to move on then to, I'm looking for my other page. We're going to move on to a bit of dry dropper. Okay. Good man, James. This will all be up on YouTube anyway. Hi to all our YouTubers. Hope everybody's keeping well. Yeah, so we got no real giveaways tonight, but what I am going to give away tonight, folks, is I'm going to give away a full set of these leaders. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print out the formulas. I'm going to print out the formulas, and I'm going to put one of each leader into a pack. So what I'll do is, if you hit the share button on the stream there or comment, I will go back on Wednesday, look through do the usual comment finder thing, and pick a winner. He'll get a full set of leaders, the 4 leaders, and the 4 formulas posted out to him there on Wednesday. That's tonight's giveaway as well as the wax. So moving on then from there, we are going to look at, say, a bit of dry dropper. Me too, sometimes, Peter. Sometimes I am. But when it comes to there's a question after coming in the phone, and I'm going to actually go back and answer that one there a second. But it comes in onto when it comes to leaders and tippets and stuff like that, I will always use centimeters. Okay, so someone just come in there and just asked me quickly to mention about the length from my indicator to my nymphs. Okay, now I have a rule of thumb. Now I'm not pretending, by the way, folks, this is church, you're all at mass here, and I'm preaching, this is the gospel. This is just the way I do it. I'm just sharing the information that I've learned over the years, and just the way I do it. If you can take something out tonight, that's absolutely fantastic. I'm delighted. If you find none of it any relevance to you, well, that's okay too. If you find a load of it too, I'm glad I'm helping. So this is just the way I do things, and same when it comes to hi Kieran. It's the same when it comes to my placement of my nymphs. Now I'm really critical on this one. Okay, I like my nymph placements to be very standardized, always to be in the same. So if I'm fishing 3 inches of water versus 3 foot of water, my nymph placement after my indicator will all be in the same position. And this is all to do with my swing balance, because I want the distribution of that weight, the distance between the weights and my rod tip, the distance between the 2 weights, regardless of what bead size, between each other. I want them to be the same, because I feel sometimes that can really affect my swing balance, and it's the sensitivity that I get, that if I'm varying it from 5 foot to 3 foot because of different water and stuff like that, well, then I feel like that I'm losing out on a bit of sensitivity. So I tend to keep it everything. And I have a simple rule of thumb. Okay, indicator is in this hand. Okay, this is the perfection loop in this hand. So my rule of thumb is full length of my arm to my tip of my index finger, stretched straight out to my opposite shoulder blade is the distance between my indicator and my dropper. Now, the knot on the dropper, not the length of the dropper, but the knot on the dropper. That's the distance I go with the whole time, okay? Then my dropper is going to be about 6 to 8 inches. I always use a little bit of a length of a dropper. Then from my index finger straight out to this shoulder blade is the distance between the 2 nymphs. Okay? That's what I keep it at. Simple rule, very simple. I use Shogun, 0.10, 0.12 mostly. If it's really fine and sunny, I'll go down to 0.10 or 0.08, but mostly that's what I use. That's my formula. That's the way I do it. I find it easy. It works. I don't change it, and I stick to all the same. Always the same, regardless of what water I'm fishing. I stick to the same length between my nymphs and to my point fly. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Right, so then moving on to a bit of dry dropper. Okay, so dry dropper is something, again, we do an awful lot of here. I probably dry dropper as much as I nymph fish. And dry dropper can be super, super effective. But again, there's a couple of core things here when setting up for dry dropper. That's an absolute must. Again, you can go generic tapers, no problem whatsoever. Again, I tend to head for yes, I do, Michael, I do. I can. Someone's asking a question there. Someone's asked a question about, do I carry all those leaders? Peter McCartan, how you doing, Peter? So, yeah, I will. Normally, most days, I will if I'm going out nymphing, I will have a selection of leaders on my chest pack, depending. I have a fair idea before I go what the conditions are going to be like, early season, mid season, whatever. And I will sometimes I'll change them depending on the conditions. If I'm out dry fly fishing and it's a lovely day and in the start of the day and everything's going grand and you're on a progressive leader, next thing a wind picks up, absolutely I'm going to switch over to an aggressive leader. It's going to make all the difference whether I'm going to go home or stay or absolutely drive myself nuts trying to turn over a progressive leader into a wind. So yeah, I'll make changes sometimes throughout the day, depending, Peter. But I'd have him. I'd have a few with me at all times, in case I need to make changes. So for dry dropper, okay, again, I'm using an aggressive leader. Okay, I'm going to put up the formula here as well for the dry dropper, the first half of the formula, and then we're going to talk about the second half of it in a second as well. So, dry dropper. There's the formula I'm using from my fly line down to where I'm going to put on my tippet. So there will be no flies attached to any part of that. It's an aggressive. It's quite short. It's only about 9 foot in length, maybe 8.5, and that's long enough. I don't tend to use long tapered leaders or long ones. For dry dropper. Okay, it's always a shorter one. Again, aggressive for the simple reason, and it drives me cracked. And I, when I see this or when it happens to me, even, and it can happen to me, is that when I make my cast forward and everything straightens out in midair before it hits on the water. Very important. Okay, you got to get it straight before it hits on the water. What you want is that nymph to be at the maximum distance it can be from that dry fly. Okay, if you've got 3 foot between your, if you have 3 foot between your dry fly and your nymph when you make your leader, and you make a cast, and next thing that nymph lands a foot behind your dry fly when you make that cast forward, it's going to take time. You have zero chance of catching fish in impact unless he comes up next to dry fly. The fish is 2 foot to swim before he decides to spit out that nymph. So an aggressive leader here is absolutely crucial, okay, for effective. So when I make that cast forward, I stop early, and it allows that whole thing to straighten out. The energy travels down into that aggressive taper, and it forces that nymph to pop. Okay, pop straight out, get the maximum. You don't get it 100% all the time, but I get it fairly close as best I can. If it doesn't, straight off the water and make that cast again. Don't leave it there and let it go. Straight off the water, make the cast again. Make that nymph pop out. An aggressive leader will do that. Sometimes a generic leader will do it if you got a bit of wind behind you or whatever, or if you shorten it up, but you have got to get the transfer of energy from that rod and reel and a fast stroke in the cast, to really make that nymph pop out. Otherwise, you have a real good chance that a fish is going to take it on impact and you're not even going to know anything about it, okay, because he's got so much slack there. So when we're doing the dry dropper setup, the way I do it, that's my formula for getting to the first half of the setup. Okay, now the second half of the setup is different. Okay, so when I go from there, then when I have that formula and it's on my fly line, I'm then going to attach everything and attach my nymphs. What I'm going to do then, and we have a couple of different ways doing it, but one of the ways I've been doing it a bit lately is I will attach on, say, 0.14 monofilament. Okay, I'm a mono guy. I'm not fluorocarbon. I'm mono all the way. All right, so I attach on 0.14 mono. From there, or 0.12, depending on the time of year, okay? Springtime, 0.14. Go a bit. I always go to the heaviest any conditions will allow me to go to. Okay, so if I'm in springtime, high rivers, blah, 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 colours, colour in the water, I'll go to the bigger diameters. Okay, if during summertime, I'll get down to the finer stuff, but I always go to the highest diameter the conditions will allow you to get away with. So what I'll do is I go from there and I go about a foot of, say, 0.14. And then after that foot, I will tie in a dropper. Okay, the dry fly goes on the dropper. Dry fly doesn't go. You don't put the dry fly and then attach the New Zealand style. Not anymore. Okay, to be far effective in your dry dropper fishing, the dry fly goes on a dropper. Okay, 3 or 4 inch dropper out to the side, you're going to get more fish. All right, so if you put, like, the dry dropper, the dry fly is there to catch fish. Okay, if you've got, so I have always preached that, if you've got your clink. Okay, your clink has to be able to achieve 3 things on a dry dropper setup. 1, it must be able to support the weight that's underneath it. Okay, that's easy. Put it in broader hackle. Okay, not more hackle, but broader. Okay, so the diameter must be larger. 1, possibly 2. 1, possibly 2, Dylan. Depends on the conditions and depends on where I'm fishing and what way. But we'll talk a bit about the nymphs in a minute. So your dry dropper has to be able to achieve 3 things. in order for it to be effective, okay? One, it must be able to support the weight that's underneath it. Be a 1 nymph, 2 nymphs, 3 mil, 3.5 mil, 2 mil, whatever it may be, okay? Secondly, you must be able to see it. So having different colored posts, having bigger posts or bigger dry flies, whatever it may be, you must have visual on that, because often the take on a dry fly will be coming down and that's all the take will be. Just a little stop and it'll continue on, because that nymph is 3-4 foot behind it, down underwater. A fish will pick it up and spit it out so fast. If you can't have good visibility on that clink, you won't even see that little tiny stop or any unnatural movement against the current, and you'll be missing fish. Okay, it doesn't disappear all the time. Okay, it's often just traveling along, next thing, just a little stop and away it goes. Okay, so that's the second. And the third thing, and most importantly, it must be able to catch a fish. It's got a hook on it. It's going on there for a reason. So it's got to be able to catch fish. If you tie your tippet off the butt of it, for one, it's not going to sit right in the water, so it's not going to take any kind of a natural drift down over trout. Secondly, if a fish comes up for it, there's a good chance he's going to hit that tippet that's sticking out of the arse of the fly on his way up. Or if you have the tippet ring in the butt of it, that fly is going to kick right down because there's a lump of metal hanging out the backside of it, and the nymph is dragging it under. So it's just not effective. Okay, so there's a couple of things I'd be black and white on. That's definitely one of them, and I'd say you're all getting that point across now. But so the dry fly goes on the dry fly goes on a dropper. Okay, after that I go about another 8 inches on the 0.14, 0.12, and I tie a very, very small perfection loop. Now this one is the diameter. I can't even put it on the screen because you won't see it. It is the diameter of the needle. Okay, so I'd have a double needle like this, and I'd make a little perfection loop, and I'd wrap it around that and tighten it right in. Okay, very, very fine. Do this for a couple of reasons. One, when you're fishing dry dropper, it's a pain in the backside as you're making your way through water. I'm not changing every 2 foot, okay? But if I'm moving from one stretch of water to another stretch of water, one's shallow, one's not, I might want to extend that nymph. It is a pain in the backside to have to take off that dropper, take off that dry fly, extend it out, whatever it may be, or shorten it up is not too bad. My rule of thumb is usually 1.5 times the depth of the river is where I'll start with the distance between my dry fly and my nymph. Okay, and if I have to change that and say lengthen it, it's either tying that down there, which is ludicrous because that's where it's going to break, or go back up and strip it right back to that tapered leader form that I showed you. But that means putting in the whole new dry fly. By putting in that little perfection loop 6 or 8 inches after your dry fly, it allows you to change the length of that so quick, so effective. You're just using a straight piece of mono, tie it in up there, tie it back on your nymph, and you're gone again. Okay, so it's really, really effective that way. Also, if I get stuck, or if I get stuck in a tree, or if it's going to crack off, that's the point it's going to break. I'm going to lose a nymph and I'm going to lose a bit of light tippet. Now, when I'm doing the dry dropper, if I'm on 0.14 on the down to the clink and down to that perfection loop, from there on would probably be 0.10. If I'm on, say, if it's real summertime, I could be on 0.10 down to the dry fly, and from there on down, then it'll be 0.08. Okay, but that little point there, right at that joining, is your break point. That's where, if you get snagged in the bottom or hit a fish, that's where it's going to break. I'm not going to lose the whole rig. I'm only going to lose that very quickly. Within a matter of seconds, I'm back fishing again. Straight piece of monofilament, tie it up to the little loop, tie it up to the yoke, no change in the dry fly, straight on back again. So it's a real effective setup that we've been using for the last while, and I find it super good. And so Dylan Roberts was there asking, do I use two, sometimes how many nymphs I'm using. Sometimes I'll use two, sometimes I'll use one, depending on the way I want them to fish. So if you swing a 4 mil bead under a clink, it want to be a fair healthy clink to keep a 4 mil bead up if I want to get down that fast. So sometimes if I'm fishing flats, I could have 9-10 foot between my dry fly and my nymph. Okay, remember 1.5 times the depth of the river. So that means a 2.5 mil nymph or 2 mil nymph, if that's the size of the nymph the fish want, it takes a long time for that to get down through the water levels to get right down the bottom to where the fish are. Now you can put up a 4 mil, and yes, it'll get down much quicker, but what'll happen is as soon as it gets down, it drags the oh yeah, Johnny, you're kind of screwed that way. Johnny Wilkinson on there from Canada. Thanks, John. But they can only fish one fly over there in Canada. Of course, we were over there, British Columbia, with John. John's over here with us this summer. Looking forward to having you over, John. We can do a bit of plenty of dry dropper over here, John, during July. So using a 4 mil bead underneath a clink is just not going to really work. Okay, you need a foam block, a bung, basically, to fish that. But if you put up a 2.5 mil BE. Let's say if you're fishing between your dry fly and your nymphs, if you're fishing 7 foot. So at around about 6 foot, 5.5 foot, put a dropper in there and put a 2.5 mil bead in there. Go down another 1.5 foot and put in a 2 mil or another 2.5 mil bead there and dry dropper that. Weigh them out. They're going to be a little bit more than 4 mil. Your normal size 10 clinks will support that, no problem, because of weight distribution. Don't ask me to work out the logics for you, but it's it'll support that. So there is times if I want to get down, and as if you're waiting, if you're fishing a tournament, you haven't got time to wait for that two mil bead to sink all that distance, travel down the river, and next thing get your fish. It's an awful lot of time just waiting for that fly to get down through the water levels. Sometimes I'll double nymph it. Now it can be a bit more difficult to cast. Your timing on your casting stroke has to slow down an awful lot to allow those nymphs to straighten out behind you. Otherwise, you're going to get an awful lot of broken tips or an awful lot of knots and very frustrated. So your casting stroke has to slow down a little bit, especially on the back cast. But it will speed up and it'll get you down. But your normal clinks will support that dry dropper going down. If you want to fish the double nymph. So there we have it, folks. A short little session tonight. A little bit of information on leaders. I hope it's answered some questions. I hope it's raised even more questions for you, because that means you're looking forward to a good season and changing up and seeing what you can achieve and what we can all achieve. Of course, I'm constantly building and working on my leaders. Constantly building and working on my leaders every year. I'm tweaking them and changing them, trying to make myself more efficient, trying to make myself more better. If I decide to change a rod or reel, the leader has to change, because the whole thing, remember, the whole thing is a process. And the systems we use, I've said that before, analyze the process, by using systems. And what system do you use to make that cast, the taper leader you use, the tippet you use, and to make it all, make the whole thing come together to make your system more effective. If you analyze it that way, you're going to put up more fish on the scorecard. There's no question about it. You're going to get an awful lot more opportunities there to get some fish. So I'm going to leave it there tonight, anyway, folks. Short tonight. We're back fly tying next week. Don't forget to check out our new website, www.pescarifly.com. I hope you like it. If you do have feedback, really would appreciate it. A text message or a phone call. We certainly don't mind criticism here, and it helps us grow. And thank you all so much for your support. For all the lovely messages we got today and yesterday over the new website going up. Really do appreciate it. Don't forget, this will be up on YouTube tomorrow. If anybody wants to go back on and get them formulas, we will do a draw on. I'm just seeing if there's any questions up there. We will do a draw on Wednesday. The winner will win four leaders, and I'll also print out those 4 formulas for you and send them over to have them. So look, anyway, folks, going to leave it there. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. For anyone that gets out fishing, tight lines, and stay safe. We will be back next Saturday night with a whole new show. Back up on the voice next Saturday night. Just really wanted to cover the leaders tonight. There's an awful lot of questions about it. Wanted to cover a bit of it, give people some information, and I hope it's helped you viewers. Okay, so good night, everyone, and I'll speak to you all real soon.